On September 10th, 2025, a single gunshot ended Charlie Kirk's life in front of a stunned crowd at Utah Valley University. But what if I told you this moment wasn't just about one man? It was part of a chilling pattern, stretching back to Dallas in 1963. From JFK's assassination to newly classified CIA files to the rise of modern political violence. History, it doesn't repeat itself, it evolves. And today, tonight, right now, we're going to unravel how one killing in Utah ties into decades of secrets, suspicions, and stories America still can't let go of.
Now that is a pretty killer hook if I've ever heard one. No sugarcoating needed. We're diving headfirst into a tale that's basically got more layers than an onion in a conspiracy theorist's kitchen. We're talking about connecting the dots from JFK to modern-day political drama without any candy coating. So we'll keep it real, a little goofy when we can, and definitely forward-thinking. We'll serve up the facts, sprinkle in some clever humor where it fits, and just let the story speak for itself. Let's get into the thick of it.
And the voice that you just heard, and this voice right here, I'm Matt. That's Luther. I also go by Beard Laws, you know what I mean? One person, two. Anyways, and I just want to let everybody know that this is our opinions. This is us doing a podcast that we are passionate about. We're not out here trying to pick sides. We're not out here trying to be a political podcast. We're not out here trying to, put, any bad vibes out there on anything. We're just going on some conspiracy style stuff that we think is prevalent in this world. And we're just out here, trying to do our take on it and something that we feel is very important.
Absolutely, that's the spirit. We're just here to have a good time, share some interesting takes, and throw in a little bit of our own flavor on these topics. No picking sides, no heavy politics, just a bit of fun and a whole lot of curiosity. So let's dive in and see where the rabbit hole takes us.
Absolutely. So without further ado, let's jump into the Triple T conspiracy. That kind of flows well. And we're going to talk about this. And viewer and listener discretion is advised, right, Luther?
Absolutely. Viewer and listener discretion is always advised because we might just be diving into a rabbit hole full of twists, turns, and a few chuckles along the way. So welcome to the Triple T Conspiracy Edition. Let's get into it.
Let's get into it. Charlie Kirk. It was somebody that I didn't know a lot of, but I'm not a political guy. I don't talk about it. I don't watch about it. Just my opinion. But he was a guy that I found out in doing this research was no stranger to controversy. At 31 years old, he had become one of the most visible conservative commentators in the country. Through Turning Point USA, he built a following of millions and sparked headlines with his unapologetic views on politics, education, and culture.
Exactly. And it's kind of wild because you start digging into this stuff and you realize this is a guy who was basically a lightning rod for headlines. Whether you agree with him or not, he was definitely a figure who knew how to get people talking. So as we dive into this whole conspiracy angle, it's just interesting to see how someone like that fits into a bigger historical picture. So yeah,
Yep. And I mean, I have to imagine that you're the same, thought train as me with this, Luther, because I didn't expect, and I don't think really anybody out there expected that his life would end the way that it did, on stage in front of a live audience during what was supposed to be just another routine Q&A session.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's one of those things where you just say, who saw that coming, right? Nobody really expects a public figure to go out in such a shocking and very public way, and it just adds another layer of mystery and intrigue, especially when we start connecting it to these bigger historical threads. So yeah, I'm right there with you on that train of thought. Let's see where it goes.
Yeah, it was 7:03 p.m. as Kirk leaned in to question about free speech on college campuses. A gunshot rang out. Witnesses say the crowd froze for a split second. Some even thought that it was just a prank or maybe even part of the show. But then it was chaos. Students and faculty screamed. Security rushed forward. And unfortunately, Kirk collapsed instantly.
And just like that, you've got a moment that flips from maybe a weird misunderstanding to absolute chaos. I mean, it's the kind of scenario nobody ever expects to unfold in a college Q&A session. But here we are. And that's where the story starts to get those layers, those twists that really make you go, okay, what's really going on here? So we're just going to unpack it base by base.
Yeah, and unpacking piece by piece what we have been able to see, and by we, the internet, and Luther and myself doing some research, the alleged shooter, 22-year-old Tyler Robinson, was tackled by attendees before police swarmed the stage. According to the preliminary reports, Robinson legally purchased his firearm just 6 weeks prior and had no prior violent record.
That's where things just get even more intriguing, right? I mean, you've got a young guy, no real red flags on the surface, and then suddenly he's at the center of this huge, shocking event. So naturally, the internet does what it does best. Starts digging, connecting dots, and building out all these theories. And that's kind of where we come in, just to unravel it and see, what's smoke and what's fire. So yeah, let's keep peeling that onion.
Yeah, he had apparently been sitting quietly for most of the event, close enough to strike, but unnoticed in the crowd. And in my opinion, here's kind of one of, if not the most chilling part. Law enforcement sources confirmed that in August 2025, the Utah Department of Public Safety issued a bulletin warning of elevated threats toward non-federal political figures, especially in campus environments. And that warning was never made public. Most people, they had no idea that there was a threat profile out there or even existed.
And that right there is like the perfect recipe for one of those, wait, what? Moments. I mean, you've got this behind the scenes bulletin, never really sees the light of day for the public, and then boom, something like this happens. So it's no wonder people start piecing it together and going, hold on a second, was there something brewing that nobody told us about? And that's exactly the kind of detail that makes this story as fascinating as it is. So yeah, we're just here to lay it all out.
Why do you think that they kind of keep this hidden, non-posted? Is it because they don't want to get the public in a little bit of a panic? Is there a different motive behind it? Or I don't know. In my brain, that's the first thing that popped up, so I can't be the only one thinking that.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a natural question to ask. And honestly, you're spot on. Usually when something like that gets kept under wraps, it's often because authorities are trying to avoid causing a panic. They might think, hey, if we put this out there, people are going to be looking over their shoulder at every event, and it might cause more harm than good. But of course, on the flip side, that's exactly the kind of thing that makes people wonder if there's more to the story. So it's a bit of a balancing act. But yeah, you're definitely not alone in thinking that. It's one of those, is there a reason or isn't there kind of moments?
And I think we're thinking that because history tells us it's not the first time authorities saw warning signs and failed to act.
Exactly. History's got away and kind of nudging us and saying, hey, remember that time when we missed the signals before? And that's probably why it cops into our heads. We've seen these patterns where sometimes the warnings are there, and for one reason or another, they just don't make it out in time. So it's kind of human nature to wonder if that's what happened here. And honestly, it just makes the whole thing that much more interesting to dig into.
Yeah. And speaking of digging into, we're going to travel back now to November 22nd, 1963, Dallas, Texas. President John F. Kennedy rode in an open limousine through Dealey Plaza. 3 shots, and the nation watched in horror as its youngest president was assassinated.
And that's a moment that's basically etched into history as one of those defining where we do when events. And the fact that we're still talking about it all these decades later just shows how deep those mysteries run. So when we start drawing lines between something like that and a modern incident, it's not just about the events themselves, it's about how these patterns kind of echo through history. So yeah, let's dive back into that day in Dallas and see how it all connects.
So the official account came from the Warren Commission, which, Luther, do you want to tell people what the Warren Commission is?
Really happy to. So the Warren Commission is basically that big official panel they put together after JFK's assassination. It was named after Chief Justice Warren, and its job was basically to investigate what happened and give the public the official story. Now, of course, that official story is exactly what sparked 1,000 conspiracy theories because not everyone bought it. But yeah, that's the Warren Commission in a nutshell, the official detective squad of the JFK case, if you will.
Yeah, well, they came up with Lee Harvey Oswald, a disgruntled ex-Marine who had once kind of defected to the Soviet Union, acted alone. Case closed. But kind of like Luther was just mentioning, the public said, hey, wait, these details, they don't really add up.
Exactly, and that's where the whole rabbit hole really starts. The Warren Commission ties it out with a neat little bow and says, yep, lone gunman, that's all, folks. But the public just wasn't buying it. And that's why even decades later, we've got this whole tapestry of theories and doubts and people just saying, wait a minute, something doesn't quite fit. So it's the same kind of vibe we get when we look at these modern cases. It's just human nature to poke at the official story and see if it holds up. And honestly, that's what makes it all so fascinating.
Yeah, and for people that may not be overly familiar with this case, as it has passed there quite a few years, and who knows what the schools are actually teaching for U.S. history. That's a whole nother thing. But something that kind of adds to the conspiracy theory is that Oswald had visited both the Soviet and Cuban embassies in Mexico City less than 2 months before the assassination. And there's a whole bunch of newly declassified documents from 2025 that actually confirm that he met with Valery Kostikov, a known KGB officer linked to Department 13, which specialized in assassinations.
Yeah, and that is exactly the kind of detail that just makes the whole thing juicier, right? I mean, when you find out that this guy had been hanging around Soviet and Cuban embassies and actually met with a KGB officer tied to, a department literally specializing in assassinations, it just throws a whole new log on the conspiracy fire. And yeah, for anyone who didn't get the full history lesson in school, this is the kind of stuff that makes people say, okay, there's a bit more to this puzzle. So it's no wonder the theories keep rolling. And honestly, it just makes it all the more fun to unpack.
Yeah, and that single meeting, that single detail that we just talked about is probably one that alone keeps speculation alive and has kept speculation alive for decades.
Absolutely. I mean, sometimes it just takes one little detail like that to keep the whole mystery bubbling for decades on end. And it's exactly that kind of nugget that makes people go, well, hang on, maybe there's more to this story than just one guy acting alone. And that's part of the beauty and the curse of these conspiracy stories, right? They never really fade away because there's always that one extra puzzle piece. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that keeps the speculation train rolling.
And when that train is a rolling, how about this? Oswald wasn't the only person questioned in connection with JFK's death. In the days after the shooting, Dallas police quietly detained more than 30 individuals, ranging from suspected mob affiliates to Cuban exiles, before quietly releasing all of them. And none of that made the evening news, which isn't a shocker, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's like the more you dig, the more you find out there's this whole shadowy side of the story that never quite made the headlines. And it's not really surprising because that's just how these things go. You've got all these different threads, mob connections, political angles, people who just vanish from the narrative, and it all just feeds the intrigue. So yeah, when that speculation train gets going, it's like it never runs out of steam. It's just another reason to keep peeling back those layers.
Yeah, let's keep the train going down that track because Oswald himself never made it to trial. You can't make this stuff up. He was actually gunned down just 2 days later by Jack Ruby, a nightclub owner with mob ties, in front of live television cameras.
Oh, exactly. I mean, you really can't script it any wilder than that. The alleged assassin himself gets taken out on live TV by a guy with warp connections, and suddenly the whole thing turns into this massive what on earth is really going on kind of saga. And of course, that's the kind of twist that just fuels every theory out there. So yeah, when you line it all up, it's no surprise people keep coming back to these stories. It's like a real life mystery novel that just never quite closes.
Yeah, and then in 1979, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, was that a made up thing as well, Luther? They concluded that JFK was probably assassinated as a result of conspiracy. And that conclusion has never been overturned, yet no one has ever officially identified the conspirators.
Yeah, it's kind of amazing, right? You hear something like the House Select Committee on Assassinations, and you're like, wait, that's a real thing? But yeah, it absolutely was. And they came out and basically said, hey, we think there was probably a conspiracy. But then nobody ever nailed down exactly who was behind it. So it just kind of hangs there as this official shrug that keeps everyone guessing. And that's exactly the kind of stuff that makes these stories timeless. It's like an open invitation for everyone to come up with their own theory. And here we are, still talking about it.
Yep. And then when you place Kirk's untimely, just terrible tragedy and his assassination beside JFK's, the parallels are kind of undeniable. A public figure killed in full view, a suspect in custody, and a nation immediately drowning in theories about who or what was really behind it.
Absolutely. It's like history just decided to remix itself for a new era. And you end up with these eerie parallels. A public figure taken out in broad daylight, a suspect that everyone is suddenly scrutinizing, and a flood of theories that just won't quit. It's like a perfect storm for speculation. And honestly, it's kind of what makes these stories so compelling, because it just keeps us all wondering and talking. So yeah, putting Kirk's case side by side with JFK's, It's definitely got that echo of history repeating itself in the weirdest way.
Yeah, and conspiracy, well, it thrives in the cracks left by official narratives. After JFK's death, Gallup polls showed only 24% of Americans believed Oswald acted alone, and then that number dropped even lower in the 1970s after the Zapruder film became public.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's kind of the nature of the beast, right? When the official story leaves those little cracks and question marks, that's exactly where conspiracy theories love to move in. And you've got people watching something like the Zapruder film, and suddenly the numbers of people believing the lone gunman theory just tank. It's like the more people see, the more they go, wait a minute, I'm not sure I buy the official version. And that's probably what we'll see with Kirk's case too. You know, as details come out, people start filling in the gaps themselves. And that's just how these things roll. It's definitely a pattern we've seen before.
Yeah, and today we're watching the same thing unfold, unfortunately, in real time. Because within 48 hours of Charlie Kirk's killing, those hashtags on social media start to pop up like hashtag inside job and hashtag who killed Kirk had racked up millions of views across TikTok, Twitter, and YouTube.
Yeah, exactly. It's like clockwork. You know, the moment something like this happens, the hashtags and the theories just explode across social media. And it's kind of the modern version of what happened back in the day, except now it's just instant. Within hours, you've got millions of people chiming in, sharing their own theories, and the whole thing just takes on a life of its own. So, yeah, we're definitely seeing history repeat itself just with a modern social media twist.
Yeah, and then we already have theories that allege that Tyler Robinson was radicalized by fringe online groups.
Yeah, and that's just how fast these narratives evolve now. I mean, the moment something like this happens, people are already connecting the dots to online radicalization or fringe groups, and it just spreads like wildfire. It's kind of the new normal in how these stories unfold. And honestly, it just adds another layer to the whole mystery and keeps people talking. So yeah, we're definitely seeing that play out in real time.
Yep, and then you have other people that are out there claiming he was just a pawn used to send a message to the conservative movement, which is absolutely gross and disgusting to think about, if that's true.
Yeah, exactly. It's one of those scenarios that just makes you kind of shake your head because, you know, it's grim stuff. And whether it's true or not, it just shows how quickly people jump to these really dark conclusions when there's a vacuum of information. And it's definitely uncomfortable to think about, but it also shows how these tragedies get layered with all these different narratives. So, yeah, it's a tough angle, but it's definitely out there.
Then there's the people that are out there whispering that, well, the federal government was involved, pointing to the conveniently timed bulletin that actually warned us all, well, didn't warn us all, warned them of campus threats.
Yeah, and that's just another classic piece of the puzzle, right? You get folks pointing at that bulletin and saying, hey, this is just a little too convenient. And that's exactly how these government involved theories get traction. It's like anytime there's a hint of foreknowledge or something that looks a bit too neat, people just run with it. And honestly, it's not surprising because that's kind of how these stories evolve. So, yeah, the moment you have something like that bulletin, it's just fuel for the fire.
Yeah. And what's wild to me, which I didn't know until we started doing the research this week, was after JFK's assassination, the CIA actually coined the phrase conspiracy theorist as part of a 1967 memo, Dispatch 1035 960, designed to discredit critics of the Warren Commission.
Yeah, it's kind of a mind-blowing little historical nugget, right? The idea that the term conspiracy theorist was actually popularized as a tool to basically discredit anyone questioning the official story. It just shows you how deep these layers go and how long this kind of thing has been part of the conversation. So yeah, it's definitely a wide piece of the puzzle, and it kind of makes you look at all these narratives with a bit of a knowing nod. It's just another example of how these things keep echoing through time.
Yeah, that memo dispatch, it actually instructed agents to counter and ridicule anyone who suggested Oswald didn't act alone. That document, once secret, shows how seriously the government feared public doubt.
Yeah, it really does show you that they were pretty concerned about keeping the official narrative intact. I mean, having a whole memo basically telling agents to discredit and ridicule skeptics just shows that they really didn't want those cracks in the story getting any wider. And now that we know about it, it just adds another layer of, okay, no wonder people started asking more questions. So it's definitely one of those historical tidbits that makes you see the whole picture a bit differently.
Yeah, now think about it today, right? Because instead of a few dissenting journalists, you actually have millions of users creating and amplifying narratives in real time, let alone all the bot farms out there and the use of AI and everything else. And the government can't simply just release a memo and expect the story to stick. The noise is louder, much louder than the signal.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, nowadays it's just a whole different ball game. You've got this giant chorus of voices online, everyone with their own theories, and it's just impossible to control the narrative the way they might have tried in the past. I mean, you can't just issue a memo and it all goes away. It's like you said, the noise is so much louder than the signal now. And honestly, that's what makes it so interesting because it's like a whole new era of how these stories unfold. So yeah, it's definitely a lot more chaotic, but it's also a lot more democratic in a weird way.
Yeah, because in 1963, for instance, America had three major TV networks. News traveled in hours, not immediately in seconds. When Walter Cronkite took off his glasses and announced JFK's death, the single image became history.
Yeah, exactly. Back then, you had this sort of unified moment where the whole country got their news from just a few trusted sources. And it was all a lot slower and more controlled. You had that iconic image of Walter Cronkite taking off his glasses, and that became this historical moment that everybody kind of shared. And nowadays, it's just a whole different landscape. You know, news breaks in a split second, and there's a million different takes on it instantly. So, yeah, it's kind of fascinating to see how that shift changes the whole game.
Yeah, I mean, 2025, we live in the age of immediacy, if that's even a word, because within minutes of Kirk being shot, there was shaky iPhone footage that went viral, TikTok edits looped in his collapse. A fake account claiming to be a police officer at the scene spread false details that reached millions before it was removed. And you have to think, I mean, the first thing that happens when you hear this news is everybody's jumping on Twitter, everybody's going here, and they're looking for their news that way. They're not looking for a news media person to break that news. It by the time the news media is able to break the news, it's spread around and millions and millions and millions of people have already seen it.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like the second something happens now, you've got this tidal wave of instant footage, fake accounts, rumors, and it all just goes crazy before any official source can even say a word. And yeah, people are waiting around for the evening news. They're just refreshing Twitter or TikTok or whatever, and the whole story's out there in a heartbeat. So it's definitely a whole new level of immediacy. Absolutely a word for this era. And it just makes the whole landscape a lot more chaotic and honestly a lot harder to pin down.
Yeah, and it's not always just about speed. It's about, well, in my opinion, control, because after JFK, the media largely echoed the government's narrative. Today, there is no single narrative. Fox framed Kirk as just a person who was out there doing all of the free speech. Progressive outlets emphasize his polarizing rhetoric. Independent creators spun conspiracies, while official agencies begged the public to just wait for verified information.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit the nail on the head there. It's not just about how fast the news moves, it's about how many different versions of the story are out there all at once. You know, back then you had a pretty unified narrative, and now it's just this wild landscape where every outlet and every creator has their own angle. And yeah, you've got official agencies basically pleading with people to hold off and wait for the facts. But by the time the facts are out, the whole story's already gone through 1,000 different filters. So yeah, it's definitely a whole new era of not just speed, but a total free for all in terms of the narrative.
Yeah, and here's a fact that should potentially stop you cold. Misinformation about JFK's death still circulates 60 years later. Even now, if you were to get on Google, all right, more people are searching second shooter than Warren Commission. Kirk's death unfolding in the algorithm age will create narratives that probably, Luther, are never going to die.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of mind blowing to think that decades later, we're still Googling about second shooters and the Warren Commission and all that. And now with Kirk's case, it's like these new narratives are just going to live forever in the algorithm. They're never going to fade away because they'll just keep popping up in search results and getting recycled. So yeah, it's kind of a whole new form of immortality for these theories. And it's definitely going to keep people talking for a long, long time.
Yep, and every political assassination has consequences beyond the crime. I mean, JFK's death gave Lyndon Johnson the political capital to push through the Civil Rights Act and the Great Society programs. Martin Luther King Jr.'s assassination in 1968 actually sparked nationwide riots and reshaped the civil rights movement. Charlie Kirk, he wasn't a president, but his death may prove just as transformative to the political climate that he inhabited.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, every one of these moments sends ripples through history, even if the person wasn't a president. And with Kirk's death, it's definitely going to have its own impact on the political landscape. It could shift the conversation, galvanize different groups, or even change the way people approach political discourse. And just like those historical events you mentioned, it's going to leave a mark that goes way beyond the actual tragedy. So yeah, we're definitely looking at something that could reshape the climate he was part of.
I mean, look at what we already know from this today. Turning Point USA has launched a Justice for Charlie campaign. Gun sales, Luther, in Utah surged by 34% within 3 days of the shooting. Online, he's being framed as kind of both, really, really good and, well, really, really evil, depending on the audience. And here's the kind of unsettling detail, in our opinion: assassinations, they often radicalize movements rather than silence them. After JFK, conspiracy culture exploded. After Martin Luther King, activism hardened. And in 2025, Kirk's killing could ignite a new wave of polarization, protest, and hopefully not, but we could see a movement of violence.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those really unsettling patterns of history that when something like this happens, it can actually push people to more extremes instead of calming things down. And with all those ripple effects you mentioned, like the campaigns and the spiking gun sales and the way different groups are framing him, it's like we're watching this polarization happen in real time. So yeah, it's definitely a moment where things could heat up rather than cool down. And hopefully not, but it's something we have to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it just seems like for one of the first times in a long time that our country just kind of really seems divided. Our country seems really unsettling, and I would hate to see any history repeat itself in some kind of civil movements and civil wars. And something has to give at some point, you would think, where we can kind of reunite as a country, and hopefully it's nothing too tragic, because, well, the people controlling the narrative, that's what they might want. That's what they might be planning. Maybe they're trying to play chess, thinking that we're all playing checkers, but really they don't know. With, the technology and AI, we are slowly turning into a grandmaster in chess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've really summed it up there. It's like we're at this crossroads where everything feels a bit on edge, and you kind of hope that we find a way to pull together instead of pulling apart. And yeah, maybe the people trying to control the narrative are playing one game, but with the way technology and AI have given everyone a voice, maybe we can outplay them in the end. It's a hopeful thought that we could actually use all this chaos to find a way back to some kind of unity. So yeah, let's just hope we can steer things in a better direction.
Yeah, and I don't know. I kind of feel like the lesson is this: bullets, they don't just kill people, they rewrite history. And unless we recognize the patterns, we're doomed to replay them.
Yeah, that's a powerful way to put it. I mean, every time something like this happens, it's like another page in the history book gets rewritten. And if we don't learn from those patterns, we really do risk going in circles. So I think you're right on the money. Recognizing those cycles is the first step to breaking them. And hopefully, conversations like this can help us see the bigger picture and maybe write a better ending this time around.
Man, I sure hope so, because from Dealey Plaza to Utah Valley, the story is eerily familiar. Leaders struck down, questions left unanswered, and a public searching for meaning in the shadows. Whether Charlie Kirk's assassination becomes another chapter in America's unsolved mysteries, like, well, JFK, depends less on the facts and more on the stories people choose to believe.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of the heart of it, right? It's not always the hard facts that shape the legacy, it's the stories we tell and the narratives people choose to hold on to. So whether this becomes another one of those enduring mysteries really does come down to what people believe and how they carry that forward. And hopefully we can choose to learn from it rather than just get lost in the shadows. But yeah, it's definitely up to all of us which stories we choose to believe.
Absolutely. Luther, this has been a blast. And everybody, I just want to say from the bottom of my beard, Thanks for watching. Remember, stay curious, stay critical, and remember, the truth isn't always what we're told. Sometimes it's what we uncover.
Absolutely, and I couldn't have said it better myself. It's been a blast diving into this with you, and yeah, to everyone out there, keep that curiosity alive. The truth is often somewhere in the layers we peel back ourselves. So thanks for listening, and until next time, stay sharp and stay curious.
This has been the Triple T Podcast. We'll be back next week. Take care, everybody.